By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Hi, I'm Kate Sheehan Roach with Contemplative Journal, and we're here in Boulder at Naropa University with Judith Simmer-Brown, Professor of Religious Studies. It's a great honor to be with you, Judith. Thank you so much for meeting with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
As we begin to discuss contemplation and compassion, perhaps we should begin by defining contemplation.
Yes, of course my definition will come very much from the Buddhist tradition. I think that in general, though, in the emergent contemplative studies movement, we understand the contemplative practice or the contemplative aspect of life is one where there is an inner reflective knowing that is cultivated. And in contemplative education, we speak of it that most education emphasizes third-person learning, meaning we study what others have learned and written, and we learn from them. And of course, one of the issues in education is that we have tended to remove the inner subjective voice from education. So many times when students come to me, particularly as graduate students, with an undergraduate education that may be very, very good, they have no sense of trust of their own inner wisdom. So one of the things that we've worked very hard with here at Naropa University is a balance of understanding that the inner wisdom is the point of education.
You've described compassion as passion purified of self-centeredness. How does one go about this purification process?
I think that compassion is one of our most fundamental capacities. But for many people, that capacity has been lost because of confusion and being preoccupied by one's thoughts and emotions, being driven by self-centered concerns. And one of the powerful things about meditation practice, whether it's in Buddhism or other traditions that I know about, meditation puts us in touch with our inner nature, our fundamental, divine, basically good nature, which we have lost track of. And part of the meditative journey that is so challenging is that, of course, we have a lot to get through to get to that inner nature. We find all the petty concerns, all of the thoughts about, all of the preoccupations, thinking about the past, planning for the future. And meditative practice has the capacity to put us squarely in the present moment, where we see that the past is gone, and the future has not yet come, and we are right here, and all of those thoughts and emotions really are extraneous to our fundamental nature. As we begin to deepen and settle into that fundamental nature, we begin to discover a vastness that we may have completely forgotten. And when we connect with that vastness, we can develop a much bigger mind. We begin to recognize that all of our desires and our frustrations, all of our hurts, are not just our own. Everyone has felt this at one time or another. And many people are lost and completely snared by that kind of pain and hurt and frustration in their lives. The extent to which we can begin to connect to that universal quality, then we begin to see that being snared by these kinds of hurts can limit us and can keep us from real, genuine happiness. And so then compassion spontaneously ignites from that kind of discovery.
Well, if I may quote you to you, Judith, you have written, "We can build a diverse, contemplative, enlightened society when we have transformed our education to affirm the basic goodness of every person." Tell me how this links in with compassion.
When we can contact our own basic goodness, our own divine nature, our own vast potentiality, we also have to recognize that everyone has this. And so as a professor and as a meditation teacher, when I recognize that basic goodness in myself, I also recognize it in my students. And I recognize that many of my students who come are completely out of touch with their own inner wisdom, their own basic goodness. And so my journey as a professor is to draw out in them the confidence in their own basic goodness as fundamental to their education. So that, for instance, if they read some great teaching from a spiritual tradition of Hinduism or Buddhism, Christianity, that they recognize this isn't just about that. It's a mirror about their own basic potentiality. So this is an incredibly powerful educational tool. As students develop compassion for themselves, then they automatically develop compassion for others.
Judith, I love the way you discuss the role of desire in compassion in the context that passion must be refined by spiritual training in order to be transformed into compassion. Tell me more about that.
It's very interesting because this is one of the specialties of Tibetan Buddhism, to really learn how to transform the emotions, but it can be taught in fundamental sitting practice. And I'll tell you a story. Over 30 years ago, I was sitting a month-long retreat, and it was a retreat where we sat for probably 14 hours a day, and it was silent, and during that retreat, my meditation instructor for that retreat was Pema Chodron, who's an old friend. I developed a real interest in another person who was in the retreat. I really fell in love with this person who was in the retreat. Somebody who turned out to be my husband. I'm still married to him. We've been married 32 years, so this was 33 or 34 years ago. It was very interesting because Pema gave me the core teachings very simply, that we have in the Tibetan tradition, that when you begin to feel some kind of passionate interest, that the instruction is very simply to let go of the object of your passion and just feel passion. And the object comes right back. So this man who I was attracted to, my husband Richard now, I kept fixating on him during this month-long retreat. And as I noticed that I did that, I let it go and just came back to the feeling of passion over and over again, coming back to the feeling of passion. And this is the core teaching. There are a lot of more elaborate teachings that go along with this, but this is a very core one. And what you begin to discover is that the kind of fixated nature of emotions that tend to let everything else go and develop kind of tunnel vision on the object of aggression or object of passion, that if you let go of the object over and over again, the quality of the passion becomes a kind of radiation quality, where you have that quality of passion about life, not about a particular object of desire. And we notice that when we meet Tibetan Buddhist monastics, and from the Dalai Lama to all the famous Tibetan monastics, they have a kind of glow and warmth that you don't find in monastics in most cultures. And the reason is because they practice this. It's about turning passion into compassion and developing warmth and care for all things, not just the object of desire. This is really a core teaching in the contemplative tradition of Tibetan Buddhism.
So there's true compassion, and then there's something you refer to as idiot compassion. Tell me about that.
The term idiot compassion was coined by my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and he spoke of it as compassion which is mostly self-centered, where we want to fix someone and make them the way we want them to be. He spoke of a lot of sort of do-gooder efforts are based on idiot compassion, our inability to tolerate the suffering of others. And when we do that, we want to just fix them up. We want to just, give them food, give them housing. You know, there's so much controversy around homeless people throughout our country in this economy. And what do they really need? Unfortunately, we don't spend time actually trying to find out what they really need. And we just want to give them food or give them money or give them housing, when actually they want to be seen as human beings, most of all. They want to be related to as human beings. And I think that's the difference between idiot compassion and true compassion. True compassion is meeting the other person, spending time and finding out what the needs are, rather than just throwing money, resources at a situation to sort of basically send people away. Idiot compassion is very quick in its judgment. It's generous, but generosity with lots of strings attached. Very often, if people don't shape up right away with what we give them, then we become impatient and we reject them. It's not an abiding kind of compassion, the kind that we're really wanting to cultivate as contemplatives.
Tell me about the bodhisattva vow and how this plays into compassion.
One of the key steps in the journey of being a Buddhist practitioner is the step where one makes a commitment that one is practicing and seeking enlightenment, not for oneself, but for all beings. And this is a major step along the path of being a Buddhist practitioner. It doesn't happen right away. It happens after a period of practice. And it requires that we really come to understand deeply our own nature. And what we begin to understand is we are not isolated, independent human beings. We are connected inextricably with all other beings. So there's no way that I could practice only for myself. There's no individual enlightenment in Buddhism. It's impossible. The only kind of enlightenment is the enlightenment that is tied with everyone else. And so at a certain point, you see this in oneself, you see it in others, that there's some connection that we are all tied together. And the only way that the world will improve at all is if we all do it together. So this is when Buddhists take the bodhisattva vow. And the bodhisattva vow is the vow to dedicate one's spiritual practice for the betterment and awakenment and happiness of all beings. So it's a major step, and Naropa University would not exist if it had not been for a core group of bodhisattvas who wanted to dedicate their own practice to helping others. And so in our mission statement, we have as our fundamental mission statement that we aspire for our students to see the world as it is and to change it for the better.
Wonderful. Your book, Dakine's Warm Breath, is such an expansive, deep, and thoughtful look at the feminine principle.
Ironically, in Tibetan Buddhism, the feminine is wisdom, the masculine is compassion, which is fascinating. But the fundamental energy of the feminine in Tibetan Buddhism is this very alive, electric, open inquisitiveness. And it was very powerful for me to learn that that was called feminine, because it's opposite of what we have usually in the West. And it gave me a sense that my own inquisitiveness had something to do with being female. There's also a sense in Tibetan Buddhism that fundamental energy it can be very painful, especially, again, if it becomes egocentric. But if it becomes very much cultivated, then it becomes a journey that is alive spiritually. If it is not grounded by the masculine compassion and skillful means, it can also be very painful as well. So there are practices in Tibetan Buddhism that help one develop these fundamental qualities of wisdom and qualities of compassion and skillful means that allow one to become a more balanced human being.
How does this tie in with your teaching on transforming neuroses into compassion?
The whole notion of transforming neuroses into compassion, again, is core to Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And the fundamental idea is just what I talked about earlier, of sitting with passion, letting go of the object, letting go of the storyline. Our neuroses are full of storylines of slights and being betrayed or being ambitious, wanting this or that, and or being disappointed that we don't get this or that. If we can let go of those storylines and stay with the feeling of the emotions themselves, then they transform into wisdom. And again, it means that every time we let go of storylines, we're letting go of ego clinging. We're letting go of our self-centered nature of always making it about me, and instead beginning to see that this is just energy of the way the world works, and it could, at its core, be wisdom.
I was especially moved by a teaching you share that states simply, never give up on anyone.
Yes. One of the phrases that came from the founder of Naropa University, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he had this phrase that became a slogan for many of his students like me: never give up on anybody. And this is really a slogan about basic goodness and the fundamental divine nature of all beings, that so often we're quick to write people off and to, if we disagree with them, we see it in our political scene, our public life, we see it in our universities, we see that it's very difficult to disagree with people without writing them off. And I think that one of the fundamental things we need in order to build a peaceful and harmonious world is to never give up on who people are, even if we disagree with them, even if we have problems or personal issues with them. We have to learn to live together. And this slogan, never give up on anyone or anything, he went on to say later, has to do with a fundamental commitment to our mutual life and happiness and flourishing. And if we don't commit to that kind of human flourishing of everyone, we're going to have very limited results in whatever we do. The other thing that I remember that His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote in an article back before he won the Nobel Prize, and it was one of the bases upon which he won the Nobel Prize. He said that this kind of attitude of working for the benefit of everyone, people may say we're naive and that it's impossible, that it will never work. But he said, if there were any other solution, we've tried all the other solutions. It's time for us to choose this solution of actually working for the benefit of all beings, not just our country or our tribe or whatever. And when we do this, we will find it a worthy project that is going to take a long time, many lifetimes, but it is the only worthy project for us to engage in. And he called this hope for the future, that we have to recognize that we cannot give up on anyone or anything.